I thought I'd lost everything when my grandmother died. My cousins circled like vultures, my aunts whispered about dividing up her estate, and my own mother acted like I didn't exist. They all gathered at the lawyer's office that Tuesday morning, designer handbags clutched tight, ready to claim their pieces of Grandma Rose's fortune. What they didn't know was that 3 months earlier, Rose had pulled me aside and handed me a key. Not to a safe deposit box or a house, but to something much more valuable. By the time that lawyer finished reading the will, their smug faces had turned to pure shock. Because everything they thought they were about to inherit, I already owned it all.
I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The phone call came at 6:47 in the morning on a Sunday. I was barely awake, fumbling for my coffee maker in my tiny Chicago apartment, when my mother's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Rose is gone, B. Heart attack in her sleep." That was it. No "I'm sorry" or "Are you okay?" Just the cold facts delivered like a weather report. I should have expected as much from Patricia Caldwell, but something about losing the only person who'd ever truly understood me hit differently. Grandma Rose had been my anchor since childhood. While my mother was busy climbing the social ladder in Denver and my father was buried in his law practice, Rose was teaching me to bake apple pies in her sprawling Victorian house in Salem, Oregon. She was the one who listened when I talked about my dreams of opening a small bakery instead of following the family tradition of law or medicine. She was the one who never made me feel like a disappointment. The funeral was a circus. The entire Caldwell clan descended on Salem like a storm system, filling up the local hotels and restaurants. There was my mother, Patricia, immaculate as always in her black Chanel suit, flanked by my aunts Margaret and Susan. Margaret had flown in from her Manhattan penthouse, while Susan arrived from her vineyard in Napa Valley. Their children, my cousins, Bradley, Chelsea, and Vincent, trailed behind them looking appropriately somber, but with calculating eyes. I'd driven up from Chicago in my beat-up Honda, staying in a modest motel on the outskirts of town while the rest of the family occupied the luxury suites downtown. During the service, I sat in the back row, watching as one by one they gave eulogies about a woman they'd barely visited in the past 5 years. Bradley talked about Rose's unwavering family values, which was rich considering he'd missed her last 3 birthdays. Chelsea spoke tearfully about their special bond, though I couldn't remember the last time she'd called Rose without wanting something. Vincent kept his remarks brief, probably calculating inheritance taxes in his head. After the burial, the family gathered at Rose's house, the same Victorian mansion where I'd spent countless summers. The place looked exactly as I remembered: hardwood floors that creaked in all the right places, lace curtains filtering afternoon sunlight, and the lingering scent of her famous lavender cookies. But now there was tension in the air. I caught whispered conversations in corners, subtle glances exchanged across the living room. My cousins were measuring curtains and appraising furniture with their eyes. Margaret was already talking about maximizing the property value, and Susan kept mentioning how the house would be perfect for entertaining once they updated the decor. The worst part was how they treated me. Not with cruelty exactly, but with the kind of dismissive politeness reserved for distant relatives or family friends. They'd nod when I spoke, offer weak smiles, then turn back to their important conversations about market values and estate planning. "It's such a shame Rose never married again after Grandpa died," Margaret said to Susan while I was sitting right there. "She might have made better financial decisions with a man's guidance." I bit my tongue, remembering how Rose had built her small restaurant into a regional chain through pure determination and business savvy. She'd been sharper with money than any of them, but they saw only an elderly widow who'd grown sentimental in her final years. 3 days after the funeral, Rose's attorney, Mr. Harrison, called to schedule the will reading. The appointment was set for the following Tuesday at his downtown Salem office. The way my family reacted, you'd think they were planning a heist rather than attending a legal proceeding. Chelsea immediately started researching probate law. Bradley began making calls to real estate agents. Vincent, always the pragmatist, started drawing up preliminary plans for liquidating Rose's assets efficiently. They formed a united front, suddenly including me in their group text messages and family dinner plans. "We need to stick together during this process, Bea," my mother told me over dinner at the hotel restaurant. "Family unity is important when dealing with these legal matters." It was the most attention they'd paid me in years, and I knew exactly why. They assumed Rose had left everything to be divided equally among her children and grandchildren. In their minds, I represented a sixth of the estate they'd have to negotiate with. Better to keep me close and compliant. But they had no idea what had really happened 3 months before Rose died. It was early spring when I'd driven up to Salem for what I thought was just a regular visit. Rose had sounded strange on the phone, not sick exactly, but serious in a way that made me concerned. When I arrived, she was waiting on the front porch with 2 cups of tea and an expression I'd never seen before. "Walk with me, sweetheart," she'd said, leading me through her garden toward the old oak tree where she'd hung a tire swing for me decades earlier. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully," Rose had begun. "I've been watching this family for years, watching how they treat you, how they treat each other. I've seen the way your mother dismisses your dreams, the way your cousins look right through you unless they need something. I'd started to protest, to make excuses for them the way I always did, but Rose held up her hand. "I'm not angry with them, Bea. I understand why they are the way they are. Success and money can change people, make them forget what really matters. But you're different. You still bake cookies for your neighbors. You still send handwritten birthday cards. You remember what it means to care about people more than profit margins." She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. "6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, all with my name on them. "But Rose, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret?" "Because I wanted to see how they'd treat you when they thought you were just another heir fighting for scraps. I wanted you to see their true colors before you inherited the responsibility of dealing with them." She'd smiled then, the same warm smile that had comforted me through countless childhood scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. "6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, all with my name on them. "But Rose, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret?" "Because I wanted to see how they'd treat you when they thought you were just another heir fighting for scraps. I wanted you to see their true colors before you inherited the responsibility of dealing with them." She'd smiled then, the same warm smile that had comforted me through countless childhood scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. "6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, all with my name on them. "But Rose, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret?" "Because I wanted to see how they'd treat you when they thought you were just another heir fighting for scraps. I wanted you to see their true colors before you inherited the responsibility of dealing with them." She'd smiled then, the same warm smile that had comforted me through countless childhood scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled an envelope. "6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely." I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, all with my name on them. But Rose, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret? Because I wanted to see how they'd treat you when they thought you were just another heir fighting for scraps. I wanted you to see their true colors before you inherited the responsibility of dealing with them. She'd smiled then, the same warm smile that had comforted me through countless childhood scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. 6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements, business transfers, all with my name on them. But Rose, why didn't you tell me? Why keep it a secret? Because I wanted to see how they'd treat you when they thought you were just another heir fighting for scraps. I wanted you to see their true colors before you inherited the responsibility of dealing with them. She'd smiled then, the same warm smile that had comforted me through countless childhood scraped knees and teenage heartbreaks. She'd reached into her pocket then and pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. 6 months ago, I transferred all my major assets into a trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The house, the restaurant properties, the investment accounts, all of it. It's already yours, legally and completely. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was reading. Property deeds, bank statements.
The law offices of Harrison, Blake & Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a restored brick building in downtown Salem. The waiting room had that particular smell of old leather and fresh coffee that expensive legal offices always seem to cultivate. When I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, my family was already assembled like a war council. Margaret sat perfectly poised in her tailored gray suit, scrolling through emails on her phone with the efficient air of someone managing a Manhattan real estate empire. Susan had chosen understated elegance, cream-colored cashmere and pearl earrings that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother, Patricia, maintained her usual armor of professional perfection, every hair in place despite the Oregon humidity. The cousins clustered together on the leather sofa. Bradley wore his investment banker uniform of navy suit and red power tie, already looking like he was calculating compound interest rates. Chelsea had opted for morning chic, a black dress that probably came from some boutique in Beverly Hills. Vincent, ever the pragmatist, was reviewing documents in a manila folder, likely his own research on Oregon estate law. "Bee, darling, there you are," my mother said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted something. "We saved you a seat." They'd arranged themselves in a semicircle, leaving me the single chair that faced their united front. Even in their grief, if you could call it that, they operated like a corporate board meeting. "I brought coffee for everyone," Susan announced, producing a carrier with cups from some expensive local roastery. "We might be here for a while." Margaret checked her diamond watch. Mr. Harrison said this should be straightforward. Rose was always organized about her affairs. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The irony wasn't lost on me. They assumed Rose's organization would work in their favor, not knowing that her most important organizational decision had happened months before she died. At 9:15, Mr. Harrison's secretary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, ushered us into the conference room. The space was designed to intimidate. Mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling law books, windows overlooking the city center. Mr. Harrison himself was exactly what central casting would order for distinguished small-town attorney. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a bow tie that somehow avoided looking pretentious. "Thank you all for coming," he began, settling behind his desk with a thick folder. "I know this is a difficult time, but Rose was very specific about how she wanted her affairs handled." My family leaned forward slightly, their attention laser-focused. I caught Chelsea and Bradley exchanging a quick glance, probably some pre-planned signal about their negotiation strategy. "Before we begin with the formal reading," Mr. Harrison continued, "I want to express my personal condolences. Rose Caldwell was not just a client, but a friend. She spoke of all of you often." He paused, looking directly at me.
Particularly you, Bea. She was very proud of the young woman you'd become. My mother's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Even in death, Rose was giving me attention that Patricia felt should be directed elsewhere. Now then, Mr. Harrison opened the folder and removed several documents. Rose's will is quite detailed, but I'll summarize the major provisions first, then read the specific bequests. Vincent pulled out a legal pad, ready to take notes. Bradley had his phone discreetly positioned to record audio. Margaret sat back with the confidence of someone who'd been through similar proceedings with wealthy clients. Rose's estate consists primarily of her residential property here in Salem, her business interests including 3 restaurant locations, various investment accounts, and personal property. The total value, conservatively estimated, approaches $12 million. I watched my cousin's eyes widen slightly. Even they hadn't realized Rose had accumulated that much wealth. Susan actually gasped, though she tried to cover it with a cough. The distribution is as follows, Mr. Harrison continued, adjusting his glasses. To her daughter Patricia Caldwell, she leaves the sum of $50,000 and her collection of vintage jewelry. My mother's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disappointment, then a forced smile as she processed that $50,000 was still significant money, even if it wasn't what she'd expected. To her daughter Margaret Wellington, she leaves $50,000 and her antique china collection. Margaret's composure cracked just slightly. She'd clearly been expecting something more substantial, given her successful real estate career and frequent visits to discuss investment opportunities with Rose. To her daughter Susan Morrison, she leaves $50,000 and her recipe collection, including the rights to use them commercially. Susan looked puzzled. The recipes were valuable to someone who understood the restaurant business, but she'd always dismissed Rose's cooking as quaint small-town fare. To her grandson Bradley Wellington, she leaves $25,000 and her collection of first edition books. Bradley's pen stopped moving. $25,000 was nice, but nowhere near what he'd been anticipating for his retirement portfolio diversification. To her granddaughter Chelsea Wellington, she leaves $25,000 and her art collection. Chelsea's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide her shock. She'd probably spent more than $25,000 on her last shopping trip to Rodeo Drive. To her grandson Vincent Morrison, he leaves $25,000 and her vintage wine collection. Vincent closed his legal pad. The look on his face suggested he was recalculating everything he thought he knew about his grandmother's financial planning. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. I could practically hear their mental calculators working. 6 bequests totaling $250,000 out of a $12 million estate. That left over $11 million unaccounted for. Margaret was the first to speak. Mr. Harrison, I think there might be some mistake. Where's the rest of the estate? The house, the restaurants, the investment accounts? Mr. Harrison nodded as if he'd been expecting this question. I'm getting to that. The remainder of Rose's estate, including all real property, business interests, and investment accounts, has been placed in the Rose Caldwell Charitable Trust. A charitable trust? Patricia's voice rose an octave. What charity? We weren't consulted about any charitable giving. The trust is established for various philanthropic purposes, primarily supporting small business development and educational scholarships in Oregon. The trustee has full discretionary authority to order all distributions and investments. Bradley leaned forward. Who's the trustee? Some bank? A law firm? We should have input on major decisions involving family assets. Chelsea was already pulling out her phone. This has to be contestable. Grandma wasn't thinking clearly in her final years. She wouldn't just give away the family legacy to strangers. Vincent slammed his folder shut. This is insane. She built that restaurant business for the family. She always talked about keeping everything together for future generations. The room erupted in overlapping conversations. Margaret was demanding to see the trust documents. Susan was questioning Rose's mental competency. My mother was calculating whether $50,000 was worth the cost of a legal challenge. Through it all, Mr. Harrison sat calmly, letting them vent their shock and anger. He glanced at me once, and I saw the slightest hint of a smile in his eyes. He knew exactly what was coming next. If I may, he said finally, his voice cutting through their arguments, there is one more provision I haven't mentioned. The room fell silent again, hope flickering across their faces. Maybe there was another twist, another document that would restore their expectations. The trustee of the Rose Caldwell Charitable Trust, Mr. Harrison said, looking directly at me, is Beatrice Ann Caldwell. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sound was the rain and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Then Margaret laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. Bea? That's impossible. She's 26 years old. She works at a bakery. She doesn't have the first clue about managing major financial assets. Actually, Mr. Harrison said, opening another folder, Miss Caldwell has been managing these assets quite successfully for the past 3 months. Rose transferred everything to the trust in February, and Bea has been the acting trustee since that time. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as understanding dawned on their faces. Not just that I controlled Rose's fortune, but that I'd been sitting here listening to their plans and assumptions while already holding all the cards they thought they were about to claim.
The real show was just beginning. The temperature in the conference room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bradley's face had gone completely white, while Chelsea's mouth hung open in a way that would have horrified her etiquette coach. Vincent was gripping his pen so tightly I thought it might snap in half. My mother was the first to find her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "What do you mean she's been managing the assets?" Mr. Harrison pulled out a thick stack of documents. In February, Rose established the charitable trust and transferred all major assets into it. Bea has been overseeing the restaurant operations, managing the investment portfolio, and handling all financial decisions for the past 3 months. Margaret stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is fraud or coercion, elderly manipulation. There has to be some legal recourse here. "I can assure you everything was done completely legally," Mr. Harrison replied calmly. "Rose was examined by 2 independent physicians who certified her mental competency. 3 separate attorneys reviewed the documentation. The transfers were properly recorded with all relevant authorities." Susan's perfectly composed demeanor finally cracked. But why? Why would she do this behind our backs? For the first time since entering the conference room, I spoke. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Because she wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I was just another heir competing for scraps." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Chelsea's face flushed red beneath her expensive makeup. "What's that supposed to mean?" Bradley demanded. "We've always treated you fairly." "Have you?" I asked, meeting his gaze directly. "When's the last time any of you called me without needing something? When's the last time you included me in family plans that didn't involve inheritance discussions?" Vincent slammed his legal pad onto the table. "Oh, so this is about hurt feelings? You've stolen our family legacy because we didn't call often enough?" "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Rose made her choice based on what she observed over years of watching how this family operates." Patricia finally found her maternal authority voice. "Bea, sweetheart, you're clearly overwhelmed by all this. Financial management on this scale isn't something you learn overnight. Why don't we work together to set up proper oversight, professional management?" "You mean, why don't I hand control over to you?" I stood up, feeling the shift in power dynamics physically. "I've been managing just fine, thank you. The restaurants are actually more profitable now than they were 6 months ago." Margaret's business instincts kicked in. "That's impossible. You have no experience in restaurant management or commercial real estate." I reached into my purse and pulled out my own folder, one I'd been carrying for months but never thought I'd need to use defensively. Actually, I do. Rose started teaching me the business 2 years ago. I've been working with the restaurant managers every weekend, learning operations, reviewing financial statements, and understanding the supply chain. I placed the first document on the table. Here are the profit and loss statements for the past 3 months. Revenue is up 14% compared to the same period last year.
Chelsea leaned forward to look at the numbers, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. How is that possible? Rose's managers knew the food industry, but they needed someone who understood modern marketing and customer engagement. I helped them launch social media campaigns, updated their online ordering systems, and restructured their loyalty programs. I placed another document on the table. Here's the investment portfolio performance. The trust's assets have grown by 8% since February, while the S&P 500 is only up 3% for the same period. Vincent grabbed the papers, his analytical mind automatically processing the numbers despite his emotional turmoil. These returns are actually quite impressive. Rose taught me that smart investing isn't about taking huge risks. It's about understanding value and being patient. I looked around the room at their faces, some ashamed, some defensive, all processing this new reality. Susan's voice was barely audible. What does that mean? It means the trust isn't just about charitable giving to strangers. It's about supporting family members who actually need help. I pulled out more documents. Bradley, I know your investment firm has been struggling since the market volatility last year. The trust could provide a low-interest loan to help stabilize your business. Bradley's aggressive posture faltered slightly. His firm had indeed been having problems, though he'd never admitted it to the family. Chelsea, I know you've been trying to launch that fashion consulting business but can't get traditional financing. The trust supports small business development, especially businesses started by young women. Chelsea's anger began mixing with something that looked like hope. Vincent, your environmental law practice focuses on pro bono work that doesn't pay the bills. The trust could sponsor your cases while providing you with a living wage. Vincent slammed his legal pad onto the table. Oh, so this is about hurt feelings? You've stolen our family legacy because we didn't call often enough? I didn't steal anything, I said, my voice growing stronger. Rose made her choice based on what she observed over years of watching how this family operates. Patricia finally found her maternal authority voice. Be a sweetheart. You're clearly overwhelmed by all this. Financial management on this scale isn't something you learn overnight. Why don't we work together to set up proper oversight, professional management? You mean, why don't I hand control over to you? I stood up, feeling the shift in power dynamics physically. I've been managing just fine, thank you. The restaurants are actually more profitable now than they were 6 months ago. Margaret's business instincts kicked in. That's impossible. You have no experience in restaurant management or commercial real estate. I reached into my purse and pulled out my own folder, one I'd been carrying for months but never thought I'd need to use defensively. Actually, I do. Rose started teaching me the business 2 years ago. I've been working with the restaurant managers every weekend, learning operations, reviewing financial statements, and understanding the supply chain. I placed the first document on the table. Here are the profit and loss statements for the past 3 months. Revenue is up 14% compared to the same period last year. Chelsea leaned forward to look at the numbers, her expression shifting from anger to confusion. How is that possible? Rose's managers knew the food industry, but they needed someone who understood modern marketing and customer engagement. I helped them launch social media campaigns, updated their online ordering systems, and restructured their loyalty programs. I placed another document on the table. Here's the investment portfolio performance. The trust's assets have grown by 8% since February, while the S&P 500 is only up 3% for the same period. Vincent grabbed the papers, his analytical mind automatically processing the numbers despite his emotional turmoil. These returns are actually quite impressive. Rose taught me that smart investing isn't about taking huge risks. It's about understanding value and being patient. I looked around the room at their faces, some ashamed, some defensive, all processing this new reality. She also taught me that family money should benefit family, all family, not just the ones who already have plenty. Susan's voice was barely audible. What does that mean? It means the trust isn't just about charitable giving to strangers. It's about supporting family members who actually need help. I pulled out more documents. Bradley, I know your investment firm has been struggling since the market volatility last year. The trust could provide a low-interest loan to help stabilize your business. Bradley's aggressive posture faltered slightly. His firm had indeed been having problems, though he'd never admitted it to the family. Chelsea, I know you've been trying to launch that fashion consulting business but can't get traditional financing. The trust supports small business development, especially businesses started by young women. Chelsea's anger began mixing with something that looked like hope. Vincent, your environmental law practice focuses on pro bono work that doesn't pay the bills. The trust could sponsor your cases while providing you with a living wage. Vincent slammed his pen, his expression shifting from hostility to bewilderment. I turned to the older generation. Margaret, your real estate development projects could benefit from partnership with a foundation focused on affordable housing initiatives. Susan, your vineyard sustainability programs align perfectly with the trust's environmental goals. The room fell silent again, but this time it felt differently, less hostile, more thoughtful. My mother spoke first. And what about me? You've spent 20 years building a successful law practice focused on helping families navigate complex financial situations. The trust needs ongoing legal guidance from someone who understands both family dynamics and estate planning. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. You'd want me to represent the trust's interests? I'd want you to help me make sure we're serving everyone's interests fairly. I sat back down, feeling emotionally drained, but strangely empowered. Rose didn't cut you out because she didn't love you. She restructured things because she knew this family was better than the way you'd been treating each other, and treating me. Margaret sank back into her chair. All those comments about your bakery job, about not—
The silence stretched for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Margaret was staring at the financial documents I'd spread across the table, her sharp business mind working through the implications. Vincent had started making notes again, but this time they looked more like questions than calculations. My mother sat perfectly still, her lawyer's brain processing not just the legal ramifications, but the emotional earthquake we'd all just experienced. Chelsea broke the quiet first. So, when you said you were working at a bakery in Chicago— I was, every morning from 5 to 11. Then I'd spend afternoons on conference calls with the restaurant managers, reviewing weekly reports and learning everything Rose wanted to teach me. I pulled out my phone and showed them my calendar. See these blocked out times every Tuesday and Thursday? Those were my business education sessions with Grandma. Bradley leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely impressed rather than condescending. That's actually brilliant succession planning. Most family businesses fail because the next generation doesn't understand operations. Rose understood that inheriting money and inheriting responsibility are two completely different things, I said. She spent 2 years preparing me, not just for the finances, but for dealing with— I gestured around the table— this conversation. Susan wiped her eyes with a tissue from her designer handbag. What did she tell you about us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could have been cruel, could have shared Rose's private observations about their gradual disconnection from family values. Instead, I chose honesty without malice. She said you'd all lost your way, but that didn't mean you couldn't find it again. She believed that underneath all the success and ambition, you were still the children and grandchildren she'd loved and raised. Margaret's voice was thoughtful. The affordable housing partnerships you mentioned earlier, you've already researched that? I've been researching all of it. Rose didn't just want me to inherit money, she wanted me to inherit a purpose. I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I'd been working on for weeks. This is what I've been developing, a comprehensive family foundation that supports each of your strengths while creating something bigger than any of us could accomplish alone. The first slide showed an organizational chart with interconnected branches. Wellington Real Estate Development partners with the Rose Caldwell Trust to create mixed-income housing projects. Margaret's expertise in high-end development combined with foundation funding could revolutionize affordable housing in the Pacific Northwest. Margaret's eyebrows raised. She was seeing possibilities now, not just losses. Morrison Environmental Law receives sustained funding to take on major cases against corporate polluters, with Vincent's pro bono work backed by foundation resources. No more choosing between paying rent and fighting for environmental justice. Vincent's pen was moving rapidly across his legal pad now. Wellington Investment Services becomes the foundation's financial management arm, with Bradley overseeing a diversified portfolio designed for long-term growth and stability. No more pressure to deliver short-term returns that compromise ethical investing principles. Bradley was nodding slowly. That actually addresses some of the fundamental problems with how family wealth typically gets managed. Morrison Vineyards becomes our sustainability showcase and event venue, with Susan developing ecotourism programs and hosting fundraising events. Her wine expertise combined with environmental education. Susan was sitting up straighter, her business instincts engaging with the possibilities. Caldwell Family Legal Services provides ongoing legal counsel for all foundation activities, with Mom ensuring everything stays compliant and ethical while helping other families navigate complex estate planning. My mother's expression had shifted from defensive to analytical. The legal implications alone would require substantial expertise. Chelsea's fashion consulting business gets incubated as our social enterprise division, creating sustainable fashion opportunities for low-income entrepreneurs while building her brand around ethical business practices. Chelsea actually smiled for the first time since entering the conference room. You've really thought this through. I've had 3 months to plan and Rose's guidance to build on. I closed the laptop. But here's the thing. This only works if we're actually a family. If we can learn to communicate honestly, support each other genuinely, and share decision-making respectfully. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt contemplative rather than hostile. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. If I may, there are some practical matters we should discuss. The trust documents give Bea broad discretionary authority, but major changes to structure or beneficiaries require formal amendments. What kind of changes? Patricia asked, her legal training taking over. Creating formal partnerships with family businesses, establishing ongoing financial commitments, that sort of thing. It's all possible, but it requires proper documentation. I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them, maybe for the first time in years. I don't want to make these decisions unilaterally. Rose gave me authority, but she also taught me that real leadership means bringing people together, not ruling over them. Margaret spoke first. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we spend the next month having honest conversations about what we each want, what we each need, and what we each can contribute. Then we meet again and formalize partnerships that make sense for everyone. A trial period, Vincent said, his legal mind working through the concept. Exactly. We test whether we can actually function as a collaborative family business network or whether we're better off with the traditional inheritance model of everyone going their separate ways. Bradley was studying the organizational chart again. The foundation structure provides tax advantages, professional credibility, and sustainable funding streams. Even from a purely business perspective, this is more valuable than simple asset distribution. But it requires trust, Chelsea pointed out. We'd all be depending on each other's success. We're already depending on each other, I said. We just haven't been admitting it. Every family gathering where someone was struggling financially but too proud to ask for help, every business opportunity that got passed over because we didn't have the combined resources or expertise to pursue it, every holiday dinner where we made small talk instead of discussing the real challenges we were facing. Susan reached across the table and touched my hand. When did you become so wise? When I stopped being afraid of disappointing people who were never really paying attention anyway. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. My mother flinched. Bea, we were always paying attention. Were you? When I called to tell you about getting promoted to assistant manager at the bakery, you changed the subject to Bradley's new investment portfolio. When I mentioned wanting to take business classes, Margaret suggested I focus on finding a husband with good prospects instead. The examples could have gone on, but I could see from their faces that I'd made my point. Rose was the only one who listened when I talked about my dreams instead of trying to redirect them towards something more respectable. I gathered the documents scattered across the table. But she's gone now, and we have to decide what kind of family we want to be going forward. Vincent closed his legal pad. What if we can't make it work? What if the old patterns are too strong? Then we'll have tried something different, and we'll know we gave it our best shot. I stood up, feeling emotionally exhausted but strangely optimistic. But I think Rose was right about us. I think underneath all the accumulated resentments and misunderstandings, we actually do care about each other. Margaret gathered her purse. This is going to require some major adjustments in how we all think about success and independence. Maybe that's exactly what we need, Patricia said quietly. Mr. Harrison was organizing his files. Shall I schedule a follow-up meeting for next month? Let's make it 6 weeks, I said. Give everyone time to really think about what they want this to look like. As we filed out of the conference room, the dynamics felt completely different from when we'd entered. Not fixed, there was too much history for that, but shifted in a way that felt like possibility rather than obligation. In the elevator, Chelsea touched my arm. Bea, I'm sorry, for all of it. I never realized how we were making you feel. I never told you how I felt, I replied. We all have some learning to do. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, where Oregon rain was still painting patterns on the windows. For the first time in years, I felt like I was walking forward with my family instead of trailing behind them. But the real test would come in the weeks ahead, when we had to prove whether this transformation was real or just another performance for the lawyers. 6 weeks later, I stood in Rose's kitchen making her famous lavender cookies from scratch. The recipe card was stained and worn from decades of use, written in her careful handwriting with little notes in the margins. Add extra vanilla on rainy days and double batch for family gatherings. Today definitely qualified as both. The house felt different now, not empty the way it had after the funeral, but expectant. I'd been staying here for the past month, partly to be closer to the restaurant operations, and partly because my tiny Chicago apartment felt impossibly small after inheriting a Victorian mansion. The morning light streaming through the lace curtains illuminated dust motes dancing in the air, and for a moment, I could almost hear Rose humming while she worked. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Running 10 minutes late, had to finish reviewing the partnership contracts. This is actually exciting work. That was the third positive text I'd received this morning. Margaret had sent photos of potential housing development sites, along with detailed feasibility studies she'd commissioned at her own expense. Bradley had forwarded market analysis reports showing how ethical investing portfolios were outperforming traditional ones. Even Chelsea had called twice to discuss her meeting with a manufacturer who specialized in sustainable fashion production. The transformation hadn't been seamless. 2 weeks ago, Susan and Margaret had gotten into a heated argument about whether the foundation should prioritize environmental causes over affordable housing. Patricia had initially tried to micromanage every legal document, sending me revised versions with dozens of unnecessary clauses. Bradley had struggled with the concept of long-term investing without quarterly performance pressure from demanding clients. But something fundamental had shifted. They were arguing about foundation priorities instead of inheritance percentages. They were collaborating on projects instead of competing for resources. Most importantly, they were actually talking to me like a partner instead of a dependent relative they had to tolerate. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Through the frosted glass, I could see multiple silhouettes. They'd arrived together, which was progress in itself. 6 weeks ago, they would have shown up separately to avoid having to make small talk with each other. I opened the door to find my entire family standing on the porch, and for the first time in my adult life, they looked genuinely happy to see me. "Something smells incredible," Susan said, stepping inside and immediately heading toward the kitchen. "Are those Rose's lavender cookies?" "I thought we should have something sweet for our business meeting," I replied, following her lead. Plus, I wanted to test whether I'd actually mastered her recipe. Chelsea was already examining the cookies cooling on wire racks. "These look perfect. She would be so proud." We gathered around Rose's dining room table, the same table where we'd had countless holiday dinners filled with polite conversation and underlying tension. Today, though, the atmosphere was charged with genuine excitement. Margaret pulled out a thick presentation folder. "Before we discuss the formal partnership agreements, I wanted to show everyone what we've accomplished individually over the past 6 weeks." She opened to the first page, revealing architectural renderings and financial projections. I've identified 3 potential sites for mixed-income housing developments. The foundation's funding combined with my development expertise could create over 200 affordable units while generating sustainable revenue streams. Vincent leaned forward to examine the plans. The environmental impact assessments look solid. You've really thought through the sustainability components. That's because I consulted with an environmental lawyer who knows what he's talking about, Margaret said, giving Vincent a meaningful look, something I should have been doing for years. Bradley was next, spreading out investment charts and portfolio analyses. The foundation's assets have grown to $12.8 million under the current conservative strategy, but I've modeled potential returns under different approaches, focusing on ESG investments that align with our mission. He pointed to a projection showing steady growth curves. We could potentially double our annual charitable giving within 5 years while maintaining principal growth. The key is diversification across multiple impact sectors. Patricia reviewed the legal documents with the thoroughness that had made her one of Denver's top estate planning attorneys. I've structured the partnerships to provide tax efficiency, liability protection, and operational flexibility. Each family business maintains independence while participating in shared foundation activities. Susan had prepared a comprehensive plan for transforming her vineyard into an environmental education center. We could host foundation events, offer sustainability workshops, and create a model for ecotourism that other small wineries could replicate. The revenue potential is actually better than traditional wine sales. Chelsea's presentation surprised everyone. She'd developed a detailed business plan for launching a sustainable fashion incubator. We'd provide startup funding, mentorship, and market access for designers who prioritize ethical production. It addresses economic inequality while building a profitable social enterprise. Vincent had prepared legal briefs for 3 major environmental cases the foundation could sponsor. Corporate polluters in Oregon have been operating with impunity because environmental groups can't afford sustained litigation. Foundation backing changes that equation completely. As each person presented their work, I felt something I'd never experienced with my family before: genuine pride in being part of something bigger than individual ambitions. These weren't just business plans, they were blueprints for making a real difference while honoring Rose's legacy. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out my own folder. I've been working with the restaurant managers to develop a workforce development program. We'd provide job training, small business loans, and mentorship for people wanting to enter the food service industry. I showed them the pilot program results. We've already helped 12 people launch food trucks, catering businesses, and specialty food companies. The economic multiplier effect is significant. Every successful graduate creates additional jobs and economic activity. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed the scope of what we were proposing to build together. My mother spoke first. This is remarkable. 6 weeks ago, I thought we were dealing with a family crisis. Now it looks like we're launching a comprehensive social impact enterprise. With better financial prospects than traditional inheritance distribution, Bradley added. The collaborative model creates value that individual ownership couldn't achieve. Margaret was studying the overall organizational chart I'd created, showing how all our projects interconnected. The synergies are real. My housing developments could source food from businesses your program launches. Susan's venue could host Chelsea's fashion shows, while Vincent's legal work protects the environmental standards we're all implementing. And we're just getting started, Vincent said. Once this model proves successful, we could expand to other regions, other issue areas. Chelsea was practically glowing with enthusiasm. I've never been part of something that felt this meaningful. All my previous work was just about making money or building my personal brand. Rose knew, Susan said quietly. She knew we needed something to bring out the best in each other instead of the worst. Patricia added, looking directly at me with an expression I'd never seen before: genuine respect. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. So, we're really doing this? We're making it official? We're making it official, Margaret confirmed. But more than that, we're making it permanent. This isn't a trial run anymore. This is our family's future. Vincent had already started signing the partnership documents. Rose's final gift wasn't the money. It was forcing us to become the family we should have been all along. As I watched my relatives, no, my partners, sign agreements that would bind us together in business and purpose,
I realized that Rose had orchestrated the most sophisticated intervention in family dynamics I'd ever witnessed. She'd used money not as a reward or punishment, but as a tool for transformation. The lavender cookies were perfect, just like Rose had taught me. But more importantly, so was this moment. The moment when a fractured family became something stronger than the sum of its parts. Outside, the Oregon rain had stopped, and afternoon sunlight was streaming through the windows of Rose's dining room, illuminating the faces of people who were finally, truly seeing each other clearly. 1 year later, I stood on the stage of the Grand Ballroom at the Portland Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 500 people who had gathered for the first annual Rose Caldwell Foundation Impact Summit. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I could barely get my family to listen to me for 5 minutes, and now I was addressing business leaders, nonprofit directors, and government officials about transformative approaches to family philanthropy.
The summit had been Chelsea's idea. We need to showcase what we've accomplished, she'd argued during one of our monthly family board meetings. Not just for publicity, but to prove that this model can work for other families dealing with similar dynamics. She'd been right, as usual. Chelsea had developed an incredible instinct for strategic communication since launching her sustainable fashion incubator. The program had already graduated 15 designers, 3 of whom were now generating 6-figure revenues while maintaining ethical production standards. Her own consulting business had grown to the point where she was turning away clients, focusing instead on partnerships that aligned with the foundation's mission. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. A year ago, my family thought they were gathering to divide up my grandmother's estate. Instead, they discovered that she'd already given it all away, to me. What happened next changed everything we thought we knew about inheritance, family, and the real meaning of legacy. The audience was attentive, leaning forward in their seats. I'd learned that people were hungry for stories about families that had found ways to work together instead of falling apart over money. Today, I want to share what we've learned about transforming family conflict into collaborative impact, and why the traditional model of inheritance distribution might be failing families across America. In the front row, my family sat together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Margaret was taking notes, probably already thinking about how to incorporate today's insights into her next housing development project. Vincent was scrolling through his tablet, likely reviewing legal documents for the 3 major environmental cases the foundation was now sponsoring simultaneously. Bradley was networking during my speech, which would have annoyed me a year ago, but now made perfect sense. He'd become our unofficial ambassador to the investment community, speaking at conferences about the financial advantages of collaborative family philanthropy. His own firm had pivoted to specialize in impact investing, and he was consistently booked months in advance. Susan was beaming with pride, and I could see why. The Morrison Vineyard Sustainability Center had become a model for ecotourism in Oregon wine country. She was hosting educational programs almost every weekend, and the revenue was exceeding projections by 40%. More importantly, she'd found a way to combine her love of wine with her growing passion for environmental education. My mother was reviewing what looked like legal briefs, probably preparing for her afternoon presentation on estate planning innovations. Patricia had become the go-to attorney for families wanting to structure charitable giving in ways that brought family members together rather than driving them apart. Her client list now included some of the wealthiest families on the West Coast. The key insight, I continued, is that money doesn't have to be divisive. When families focus on shared purpose instead of individual gain, inheritance becomes a tool for building stronger relationships rather than destroying them. I clicked to the next slide, showing our impact metrics from the past year. The Rose Caldwell Foundation has created 847 jobs, provided housing for 312 families, funded legal action that resulted in $4.2 million in environmental restoration, and supported 43 small businesses in their startup phase. The numbers were impressive, but they didn't capture the real transformation. What the statistics couldn't show was how Bradley had started calling me twice a week to discuss investment strategies, treating me as a genuine partner rather than a little sister who needed guidance. They couldn't measure how Margaret had invited me to co-author an article about innovative, affordable housing models for the Harvard Business Review.
They couldn't quantify how Vincent had begun including me in strategy sessions with environmental activists, valuing my perspective on community engagement. Most importantly, the data couldn't reflect how my mother had started ending our phone conversations with, "I love you," instead of, "Let me know if you need anything," the difference between authentic affection and obligatory concern. But the most significant impact, I said, advancing to a slide showing our family around Rose's dining room table, has been on our own relationships. We've learned that collaborative philanthropy doesn't just change communities, it changes the families who practice it. I told them about our quarterly family retreats, where we combined business planning with genuine relationship building. The first retreat was awkward, with everyone still figuring out how to balance their new roles as partners with their lifelong patterns as siblings and cousins. But by the third retreat, we were laughing together, sharing personal struggles and victories, functioning like the close-knit family Rose had always believed we could become. Traditional inheritance models assume that family money should be divided equally, I explained, clicking to a comparative analysis slide. But equality in distribution doesn't create equality in outcomes. Some family members need capital to start businesses. Others need ongoing support for public service careers. Still others need investment in education or professional development. The foundation structure had allowed us to address individual needs while maintaining collective ownership. When Vincent decided to run for city council, the foundation covered his campaign expenses and provided a sabbatical income that allowed him to focus on public service. When Bradley's daughter needed specialized tutoring for her learning disability, the foundation's education fund covered costs that his business income couldn't handle during a difficult market period. The result is a family that's stronger financially, more connected emotionally, and more effective at creating positive change in their community. I shared the story of our latest collaborative project, a comprehensive economic development initiative in a struggling neighborhood of Portland. Margaret was developing mixed-income housing. Bradley was providing financial literacy education and small business loans. Vincent was ensuring environmental compliance and fighting predatory lending practices. Susan was creating urban farming opportunities. Chelsea was launching a job training program focused on sustainable fashion and textile work. My restaurant management program was providing food service skills and helping graduates launch food trucks and catering businesses. Individual philanthropy might have addressed one or two of these issues, I explained, but collaborative family foundation work allows us to tackle systemic problems with coordinated, comprehensive solutions. The audience was engaged, asking questions about legal structures, family governance models, and conflict resolution strategies. During the Q&A session, a woman in the third row raised her hand. This sounds wonderful in theory, but what happens when family members disagree about priorities? How do you handle conflicts over resource allocation? It was a question we'd faced repeatedly during our first year of operations. The answer had required developing sophisticated decision-making processes and conflict resolution protocols. We've learned that conflict isn't the enemy of collaboration, avoidance of conflict is, I replied. We have structured monthly meetings where everyone presents their project updates and funding requests. We debate priorities openly, vote on resource allocation decisions, and maintain transparent financial reporting. I shared the story of our biggest disagreement to date, a heated argument about whether to fund Vincent's lawsuit against a major timber company or Margaret's expansion of affordable housing units. The discussion had lasted 3 hours and gotten emotionally intense, with Susan storming out at one point and Bradley questioning whether our collaborative model was sustainable.
But instead of allowing the conflict to fracture our relationships, we used it as an opportunity to clarify our values and improve our processes, I explained. We ended up funding both projects by restructuring our investment timeline and bringing in external partners. The lawsuit had resulted in significant environmental protections and a settlement that funded additional conservation work. The housing project had become a model for other developers and attracted additional foundation partners. More importantly, our ability to work through major disagreements had strengthened our trust in each other and our confidence in our collaborative approach. The difference between functional and dysfunctional family conflicts is whether the goal is understanding or winning, I said. When everyone's objective is finding the best solution for shared values, disagreement becomes productive rather than destructive. Margaret was nodding approvingly from the front row. She'd become our unofficial expert on family governance, developing protocols that several other family foundations had adopted. Her business background in negotiation and project management had translated perfectly to facilitating family meetings and mediating disputes. During the networking break, I was approached by a middle-aged man who introduced himself as David Chen, executor of his late father's estate. "My family is facing a situation very similar to what you described," he said. 3 siblings, multiple grandchildren, and everyone has different ideas about what should happen to Dad's manufacturing business. The lawyers are suggesting we liquidate everything and divide the proceeds, but I keep thinking there has to be a better way. I'd been having similar conversations all year with family members, estate attorneys, financial advisors, and family business consultants. The traditional approach to inheritance was creating fractured families and missed opportunities for sustained impact. The first step is getting everyone to focus on shared values instead of individual wants, I told him. What did your father care about? What kind of legacy would honor his memory while building stronger family relationships? David's face lit up. Dad always talked about creating opportunities for other immigrants to build businesses the way he did. He used to say that America gave him a chance, and successful people should pass that chance along to others. There's your foundation mission, I said. Now the question becomes, how can your father's business assets be restructured to support immigrant entrepreneurship while providing sustainable income for family members and honoring everyone's different skills and interests? We talked for 20 minutes, and I could see his excitement building as he realized there were alternatives to the divisive liquidation process his attorneys had recommended. By the end of our conversation, he was taking notes about legal structures, family governance models, and conflict resolution strategies. "You should talk to my mother," I said, pointing toward Patricia, who was surrounded by a group of estate planning attorneys. "She's become the expert on structuring these kinds of arrangements. She'll be able to walk you through the legal requirements and help you think through potential complications." Watching Patricia share her expertise with other professionals had been one of the most gratifying aspects of our family transformation. She'd gone from trying to micromanage my decisions to becoming a nationally recognized expert on innovative family philanthropy structures. Her business background in negotiation and project management had translated perfectly to facilitating family meetings and mediating disputes. During the afternoon panel, featured all 6 of us discussing different aspects of collaborative family philanthropy. Margaret talked about integrating social impact with profitable business development. Bradley explained the investment strategies that had grown our assets while funding increasing levels of charitable giving. Vincent discussed the legal and regulatory considerations for families wanting to engage in advocacy work. Susan shared insights about balancing individual business interests with collective family foundation goals. Chelsea presented data on social enterprise development and the growing market for businesses that prioritize ethical practices. My presentation focused on leadership development and the process of transitioning from traditional family hierarchies to collaborative partnership models. The most common question we receive, I told the audience, is whether this model only works for large estates. The answer is no. It works for any family that's willing to prioritize shared values and collaborative decision-making over individual ownership and control. I shared examples of smaller-scale family foundations we'd helped establish, including a teacher's family that had pulled their modest inheritances to fund educational scholarships, and a farming family that had created a cooperative structure for sustainable agriculture development. The size of the financial resources matters less than the commitment to working together toward common goals, I explained. Some of the most effective family collaborations we've seen have started with less than $50,000, but generated enormous impact through coordinated effort and strategic partnerships. During the final Q&A session, A young woman asked the question I'd been hoping someone would raise. What would you say to families who are skeptical that this level of collaboration is possible? What if there's too much history of conflict and resentment? I looked out at the audience, many of whom were probably dealing with exactly those challenges. A year ago, my family couldn't have a conversation about anything important without it devolving into arguments or awkward silence. We had decades of accumulated resentments, misunderstandings, and hurt feelings. The difference wasn't that we suddenly became different people. It's that we found a shared purpose big enough to make our individual grievances seem less important. I shared the story of our first family retreat, where we had spent an entire day just talking about how we'd each felt overlooked, undervalued, or misunderstood over the years. The conversation was painful, but necessary, creating space for genuine apologies and new understandings. Rose understood that families often need external structure to develop internal connection. The foundation work gave us reasons to talk regularly, collaborate on projects, and celebrate shared successes. Those positive experiences gradually replaced the negative patterns that had defined our relationships for so long. The summit concluded with the reception, where attendees continued networking and sharing ideas. I watched my family work the room, each of them confident in their expertise and passionate about their projects. Vincent was deep in conversation with environmental lawyers from 3 different states. Margaret was sketching building designs on napkins for a developer from Seattle. Bradley was explaining impact investing strategies to a group of financial advisors. Chelsea was surrounded by fashion industry professionals interested in her sustainable design incubator model. Susan was planning collaboration opportunities with other agricultural education programs. Patricia was scheduling consultations with the state attorneys who wanted to learn about innovative family governance structures. As the evening wound down, we gathered in a quiet corner of the reception hall, exhausted but exhilarated by the day's success. Rose would have loved this, Susan said, looking around at the crowd of people who were still engaged in animated discussions about family philanthropy innovations.
She did love this, Margaret replied. She planned for exactly this outcome when she structured the trust the way she did. The summit was just the beginning, Chelsea added. We've got inquiries from families in 12 different states who want to develop similar collaborative models. And 3 universities want to case study our approach for their business and social work programs, Vincent said. We're accidentally becoming pioneers in family systems change. It's not accidental, Patricia said, looking directly at me. Bee's leadership made all of this possible. Rose saw something in her that the rest of us missed for too long. I felt the familiar threat of tears that came whenever my family acknowledged the transformation in how they saw me. Rose saw something in all of us that we'd forgotten how to see in each other. Bradley was reviewing the day's contact information on his phone. We need to start planning next year's summit now. The interest level suggests we could easily double or triple attendance. And we need to formalize our consulting services, Margaret added. Families are willing to pay significant fees for guidance on structuring collaborative philanthropic approaches, which creates additional revenue streams for the foundation while expanding our impact beyond Oregon, Vincent pointed out. As we made plans for expanding our work, I realized that Rose's gift had extended far beyond our family. By forcing us to become the best versions of ourselves, she'd created a model that could help other families avoid the destructive patterns that had nearly destroyed our relationships. The final attendees were leaving the reception hall, but our conversation continued in the hotel lobby until well past midnight. We were no longer just family members who shared genetic material and holiday obligations. We'd become genuine partners in work that mattered, friends who chose to spend time together, and collaborators who brought out each other's strengths rather than highlighting each other's weaknesses. A year ago, I'd thought I was inheriting money and losing my family. Instead, I'd discovered that Rose had given me something infinitely more valuable, the tools to build the family relationships I'd always wanted but never thought were possible. The foundation would continue growing, our individual projects would keep expanding, and our collaborative model would influence other families facing similar challenges. But the real inheritance, the one that would last long after the money was spent, was the knowledge that family could be a source of strength, support, and shared purpose, rather than obligation, competition, and resentment. Rose's final gift hadn't been financial after all. It had been the gift of showing us who we could become when we stopped being afraid of disappointing each other and started focusing on what we could accomplish together. And that inheritance would last for generations. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.